I don't even understand the question. I think superintelligence is meaningless.
Meaningless.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of mysticism around discussions of AI, but that's just a big mistake.
Should we trust the people building the future of technology with the future of humanity?
I don't think we should trust any source of power. That's one of the foundations of democracy. Since humans are limited, flawed, fallible, they will maximize their own well-being, their own income at the expense of the entire nation or the entire world. There'll definitely be some turnover in jobs. Honestly, we don't know what the impact will be. That would be an incredibly stupid thing to do, to give it the power without knowing what goals it's going to pursue. Hasn't happened yet, but it almost certainly will.
I wanted to start with asking, what made you so fascinated about human nature? And why should people listening be fascinated as well?
Who isn't interested in human nature? We all have one. And it's at the heart of many other issues that concern us. Theories of government are basically theories of human nature. That was explicitly said by John Adams, one of the American founders. What is government but the greatest of all reflections on human nature? Are people naturally cooperative? Are people selfish? Are people naturally peaceful? Are people aggressive? Your theory of government, your theory of the economy is going to depend on those assumptions about human nature. The arts are products of human nature. We paint in order to please our visual systems. We play and sing music in order to please our auditory systems. We have fiction and poetry in order to indulge our language instincts. So human nature is at the heart of, I think, of everything else. Also in the sciences, the human brain is the most fascinating product of evolution. And it's if we have a theory of how complex life evolved on Earth, one of the things it has to account for is the most complex thing of all, namely the human brain.
Yeah, okay, so this is fascinating, and of course, where I come from, it's very relevant, the thing that you say, so perhaps we'll get into it. I just want to give you a proper introduction, perhaps, for some people who may not know you. So you are Professor Steven Pinker, a world-renowned cognitive psychologist, Harvard professor, and one of the leading thinkers on language, human nature, rationality, and modern civilization. We are here at your Harvard office, and really appreciate your time, and thank you so much for having me here again.
My pleasure.
So I want to dive into the things that you say, but given what you know about human nature, I have quite of a sensitive topic to suggest, and I want to hear your opinion on it. Given what you know about humans, should we trust the people building the future of technology with the future of humanity, in your opinion?
Well, I don't think we should trust any source of power. That's one of the foundations of democracy, is that since humans are limited, flawed, fallible, people tend to overestimate their own wisdom, their own knowledge, their own benevolence, that you need constraints on power. That's the whole basis of democracy. There are checks and balances. A president is not a king or a dictator, but is constrained by the legislature and by the legal system. There are constitutional boundaries on what governments can do. And so that would apply to technology as well. That is, you don't want private interests who might maximize their own well-being, their own income at the expense of the entire nation or the entire world.
Yeah.
So it's only to say that technology corporations, like all corporations, should be subject to rule of law. There should be laws that individuals or companies are responsible for any harm done by the AI systems that they use. There could be reasonable regulations on what agentive AI is permitted to do. That is, what control over infrastructure, control over weaponry may be handed over to control by AI.
Yeah.
But in particular, there should be accountability, responsibility. I don't think we can foresee all the possible harms or benefits of any technology.
What do you think is the biggest threat in this matter?
There's a series of threats. One is that it could be used by terrorists or malevolent agents to try to attack infrastructure, to develop pathogens and bioweapons. So that's one source of potential harm.
Yeah.
It depends on how stupid people are in deploying them. I mean, if they handed over control of weapon systems without humans in the loop, or control over the power grid, then that would be incredibly stupid unless there was extensive testing of the kind that's done with any engineering system. So I think that the standards that we currently apply to engineering, namely you can't just build a bridge, you've got to make sure, do the safety calculations and tests beforehand. You can't build a power plant. You can't build a nuclear power plant. That the feedback loops and constraints that keep any engineering innovation safe, the safety standards ought to be applied to artificial intelligence.
And do you think it's actually possible to achieve superintelligence by AI?
I think superintelligence is meaningless.
Meaningless.
Yeah.
It's incoherent, I heard you say, perhaps. Yeah. What do you mean by it?
Well, what do you mean? I mean, I can't.
When I
you
say-
brought up the term, so
superintelligent.
I can't say what someone else's term, which is not defined.
Yeah. So the biggest names in the industry are suggesting that we will have an intelligence that can create on its own without any human surveillance.
That create what on its own?
Create other things, other intelligence by itself, and improve itself.
But there's a lot of things. That is, the power will increase, but there's no point at which it's meaningful to say, well, yesterday we didn't have superintelligence, today we do have superintelligence.
I see.
That's why I think it's meaningless to say what will happen if one day we have superintelligence. I don't even understand the question. It's, will the technology improve? Almost certainly. So it'll get better. It'll never be omniscient. It'll never be omnipotent.
Yeah, perhaps this is the thing.
That's out of comic books, out of religion. That's that there are laws of physics. There's limits on information. There's no system that could learn the position and velocity of every particle in the universe. So as long as that is true, then there's not going to be an AI system that can do anything, that can know everything.
Yeah.
But they will get, obviously, like any technology, they'll get more powerful.
But it's always been humans with tools, and this seems not to be exactly the same case. But perhaps someday it will become other than a tool. It will become an intelligence of its own that can use other tools.
Well, we've had computers that develop software for decades, so there's no. I don't see that this is a qualitatively different kind of technological development. Computers have exceeded human intelligence in some domains since the 1950s. That's why we invented them. That's why we buy them. That's why we deploy them.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a lot of mysticism around discussions of AI and meaningless categories such as superintelligence, singularity. I think what we're going to see is improvement. There are going to be risks for technology, as there are for all technologies.
Yeah, this is especially relevant because the prices of this company are rising up because they are suggesting superintelligence in the future.
Well, it just gives them an incentive to keep inflating that expectation.
This is what I'm getting to. Yeah, this is very fascinating, and I want to perhaps we go back to it in a moment. But I want to touch the topic of. Everyone seems to think that the world is falling apart, even though the numbers suggest otherwise. Can you please elaborate on it, and what does it say about human nature?
It depends on what the world's a complicated place, so it depends on what you look at. But in general, when you measure the state of the world quantitatively and you compare year by year changes, which is very different from looking at the headlines this morning and say something bad happened, therefore the world is falling apart. When you do that, you forget about all the bad things that happened in the past. That it's sometimes said the best explanation for the good old days is a bad memory. And so you simply can't assess the state of the world by listing something bad that just happened, because bad things always happen. The question is, do they happen at a lower rate now than they used to happen?
And
so,
yeah.
what I've shown in my two books, The Better Angels of Our Nature and Enlightenment Now, is that most measures of human well-being have shown spectacular improvement. That the rate of deaths in war is much lower now than it was in the second half of the 20th century, to say nothing of the world wars. That was even, of course, more extreme. That life expectancy continues to improve. Global poverty continues to decrease. Their homicide rates have gone down worldwide. Suicide rates have gone down. Years of education have gone up. Literacy has gone up. People work fewer hours than they used to. There's more access to electricity, more access to clean water. More girls are going to school. Now, none of these are miracles. They're not, and none of these are processes that happen just linearly year after year. That would be kind of mystical if that happened. It's rather that people see problems, they try to solve them. Sometimes solutions create new problems. Sometimes things go in reverse. The rate of violent crime in the United States and many Western countries shot up, for example, in the 1960s, before coming down again in the 1990s. We're currently in a period where the rate of war deaths has gone up in the last 10 or 15 years. After a big decline from the 1940s to the early 2000s. But it's gone up in the last few years because of Ukraine, because of the wars in Gaza and Lebanon, wars in Ethiopia and Sudan. So we've, in the case of war deaths, that's one of the trends that in the last 15 years or so has gone in the wrong direction, although it still has not erased the progress that we saw in the second half of the 20th century. Likewise, democracy scores across the world have decreased in the last 15 years or so. So we've lost some of the progress, but not nowhere near erasing the progress that the world enjoyed in the second half of the 20th century, when the communist dictatorships fell. Many right-wing fascist and military dictatorships fell, such as in Portugal and Spain and Greece and Latin America and South Korea and Taiwan. But in other measures, such as life expectancy, poverty, education, then the world is at an all-time high. That is, it has never been better than it is today.
Okay, so there are many things in that I want to touch. But first of all, I come from a place that's torn right now with war, and it doesn't feel like that. But I want to go into it with a different direction from rationality, because I think this is the engine of this progress.
Right. And by the way, when you say it doesn't feel like that, that's another fallacy. That is, if you pick the worst spot on Earth, the worst conflict zones, you say, well, but there it feels like there's a lot of conflict. And I said, yes, that's because you chose it because it's got a lot of conflict. So it's so the way, again, the rational way to assess the state of the world is not to say, well, I'm going to pick the worst spot on Earth. And if you ask people there, they're going to say it doesn't feel like things are improving. Well, yeah, you picked the spot on Earth where things are not improving.
Yeah, but when
circular.
But when I said that that it doesn't feel like that, it's not because it was picked by me. I just born there and saw other people in my, tell that to my 4 friends who I lost in the military in Gaza. So their families, you can't tell anything to them that will console their emotions in this.
Well, no, but the point is, consoling emotions is important, But that's not why I wrote these books. I didn't write the books to console the emotions of people who've lost family members in war.
Of course.
I would, if I knew them, I would console them.
Of course, yeah.
That's not what those books are for.
Yeah. I just, because of the word peaking, this is what I said. But I want you to elaborate perhaps on rationality, because I don't know if many people understand it. Is there something embedded in us as a human race to seek religious ideas?
I don't think so, but we are vulnerable to certain kinds of religious ideas. So, for example, we're all vulnerable to dualism. That is, thinking that we have a body and that we have a soul. And the reason is that when we interact with other people, we don't treat them as just a piece of meat. We assume that there is a consciousness that we're dealing with. There are thoughts, there are feelings which don't seem to be physical. Now, if you're a neuroscientist, you say, well, all of those thoughts and feelings are just patterns of activity in neural networks in the brain. But of course, that's a finding of modern science. It's not intuitive. Intuitively, we think that other people have a non-material soul. And in fact, there's even some empirical evidence for that before there was science, such as dreams. When you dream, some part of yourself seems to be out about in the world and your body is in bed the whole time. So it's natural to think that your soul leaves your body when you dream. Or when you're in a trance from a fever or a drug-induced state. When someone dies, the body was animated by some force, then suddenly the body seems to be no longer animated. It's natural to assume that the soul has left the body. So these are all kinds of evidence that before there's modern science, that there's a separate soul and a body. That's, of course, one major part of most religious beliefs. Although in Judaism, you ask 5 rabbis, you get 6 different answers as to whether there's a soul separate from the body.
Yeah.
But it's certainly very big in Christianity.
It is.
Likewise, another intuition we have is teleology, purpose, goal-driven organization. In our lives, everything we do for some reason. I go into the other room to make a cup of coffee. I pull down the coffee beans because that's how I get a cup of coffee. And we know that our tools, our artifacts are all designed for a purpose. Why do I have a hammer? Well, someone designed it so that it could bang in a nail. Well, from there, it's very easy to extend that to the whole universe, the whole world, and say, well, why was the world created? There must be a purpose there.
Yeah.
Now, in fact, our best understanding of modern science says that the planet, the universe, were not created for a purpose. They're just the laws of physics, just acting from the past to the future without any goal in mind. But it's natural to carry over our belief in purpose to the realm of the universe as a whole. So these are, I don't think these are adaptations for religion. That is, I don't think the process of evolution made us religious, but it gave us ways of understanding the world that before modern science were perfectly reasonable. Like another kind of religious belief is in essences, in that there's some kind of living things have some inner thing, stuff, magical substance that gives them their health, their energy, and that illness consists of some kind of pollution of your inner essence by some kind of contaminant or poison. And so you get a lot of pseudoscience and quack medicine like exorcism and purging and sweating and cupping and bleeding. That again, I don't think we adapted. We're
vulnerable. Is
vulnerable is the right word.
Yeah, right
yes.
word. Yeah.
So a lot of the questions you ask about that we tend to ask about irrationality are, I think, put backwards because we educated people take for granted the scientific revolution, the Enlightenment, the idea that there are objectively true explanations for phenomena like illness and health or war and peace. The natural human tendency is that these things are unknowable. There is no answer. Therefore, one should believe the most uplifting myth,
Yeah.
the story that makes your tribe look good, that rallies your tribe together, that makes the other tribe look bad. The idea that there can be correct answers it's an important revolution in human thought, but it's not cognitively natural.
Yeah, this was fascinating. Thank you so much for that. But I want to dive into, because you and I hope we will have the time to go back to intelligence and the part of artificial intelligence in it. But I want to ask you about consciousness, because this was implied in your current answer. You say it's not a miracle, and it's a given product of evolution. How do you come about in explaining consciousness?
It depends what you... Consciousness is a word that has several meanings.
Of course.
So it depends what you're referring to.
Let me clarify. I'm talking about the awareness of being.
That's easy to explain. We have to monitor ourselves because we're social beings. We care about how other people react to us. And so we engineer ourselves, including our behavior, to anticipate how other people will react. So that's in fact not a puzzle at all, what you just said. Why subjective experience exists at all.
Yeah, okay.
That is, why does it feel like something to be me, and to see blue as blue, and to taste lemon as sour subjectively in terms of how I myself experience it right now. One of the compelling sources of religious belief is the idea that consciousness is part of this soul that gets back to our discussion of dualism.
Yeah.
That is, there's a mind, there's a body. The mind, of course, would be the locus of consciousness, and this is how Descartes pretty much defined it. But there are two problems with that from a modern rational point of view or scientific point of view. One of them is that we know that consciousness depends completely on the activity of the brain. That is,
electricity.
Yes, electricity and chemistry. That is, and the reason we know that is that when you go in for surgery, the anesthesiologist injects you, puts a mask on it, and turns off your consciousness, and then brings it back. That consciousness is affected by drugs. It's affected by the electrical stimulation of the brain. You can cause consciousness to happen. You can turn it on. You can turn it off. That it's completely a function of brain activity, and that there is no such thing as a disembodied consciousness. That is, for example, you can't commune with the soul of your dead aunt who will tell you accurately where she hid her jewelry. And show where that information is accurate. Seances don't work.
Yeah.
People have tried. There's no ESP. There's no clairvoyance. That all awareness depends on transmission of information through physical media, then resulting in brain activity.
Yeah.
But also part of the reason that the religious explanation doesn't work is that dualism is false, at least in terms of a separate substance giving rise to consciousness independent of brain activity. But also it just doesn't really, what remains puzzling to us in the scientific explanation, that is, why does brain activity feel like something, is just as big a problem for a religious explanation. What is it about a soul that allows us to feel something? And if a religious person says, well, it just is, by definition, the soul is something that's conscious, I'm just saying it now and you got to believe me, then I could just say, well, information processing in the brain is conscious. You got to believe that. Mm-hmm. So you're not really bridging the objective-subjective divide with the religious claim. It's really a pseudo explanation. If you're talking about the fact that there's a difference between conscious processing and unconscious processing. So for example, when you learn a new skill, you learn how to drive, you learn how to write, you learn how to tie your shoes, you learn how to hit a ball with a bat. You have to think about every motion. It's completely conscious. When you learn a new language and you learn the conjugations of the verbs or the constructions, But then when you practice, it's no longer conscious. You don't think about it anymore. It just happens below the level of consciousness. If you believe in the theories of Sigmund Freud, then there are unconscious desires and there are conscious desires. Now, none of that is a particular mystery. It's just that the consciousness itself has a limited capacity to process information. You can't hold 47 numbers in memory at the same time. You can hold, 3 or 4.
Yeah.
And so that the part of the brain that gives rise to consciousness keeps most information out and lets it be computed by automatic processes that take place without needing the conscious part of the brain.
Yeah.
So that's just a system of design of an information processing system, which it's very interesting that that's the way the brain is designed. And one could argue that there are, even in computers, there's a distinction between real-time active information processing and information processing that is sealed or encapsulated or takes place without monitoring, without interrupts.
Yeah.
Why should subjectivity exist? And there's a number of possible answers. We don't know. It's not a scientific question because by definition, subjectivity is exactly what you cannot measure objectively. That's what subjectivity means. And so it's almost impossible to answer that question scientifically. But it may be impossible to answer it in any way. It may be just a puzzle to human intelligence that we are not equipped to comprehend. One of them is that there is an explanation for why neural information processing feels like something subjectively, but it's just one of a number of problems that the human brain just is not equipped to understand. For the same reason that, say, chimpanzees cannot understand prime numbers, maybe we can't understand why brain activity results in subjective awareness.
Yeah, it's not in our cards.
It's not in the cards. So that's one possible solution. Another is that consciousness is a part of information processing. Whenever there's information, there's consciousness. Now, in simple information systems like a thermostat or a calculator, maybe there's a bit of consciousness that by definition we can't know what it's like to be a calculator, what it's like to be a thermostat, or what it's like to be a clam or an oyster. There is something going on, but we'll never know what it is because we're not oysters.
Yeah.
We're not calculators. That's another possible explanation, sometimes called panpsychism, that wherever there is information, there is consciousness. Another one is that there's something very special about the physiology of the brain, that there's some quantum process, there's some chemical process that gives rise to consciousness for reasons that we don't yet understand. So these are the solutions that have been laid out. My own hunch, my own prejudice is that this is a conceptual puzzle that we can't grasp intuitively, even though we know it's true. That is, we know that neural information processing activity, at least in our brains, gives rise to subjective awareness. We know it's true. We can't really intuitively grasp why it's true. It's just the subjective-objective divide is something that is just conceptually unbreachable, unconnectable by at least by our brains.
Yeah, and this is your hunch.
Yeah.
Wow, this is fascinating.
There's yet another analysis, which is that this is all a big mistake. This is a conceptual error. There's really nothing to explain, nothing to talk about. That once you've established how the brain works, why there's a division between conscious and unconscious processing, what in the brain underlies consciousness, that is, what is the anesthesiologist turning off when he puts you to sleep, then you're committing a fallacy. You're imagining there's a little man inside the head looking in a theater, looking at a screen, and you're asking, where's the little man, what's on the screen? But that's just a big mistake. There's brain activity. It's you can call it conscious, but there's no additional problem. This is the position by Dan Dennett in his book Consciousness Explained.
Yeah. Wow, this is fascinating. And thank you again so much for the explanation. What is next for the cognitive mind and the evolution of our species? Of course, it's a broad question, and of course, evolution is a wide span of time it takes for anything to change. But in this particular times where we see a lot of rapid development and rapid changes, do you think it will come across in our cognition somehow?
Well, if it's our cognition is by design, it develops in an individual's life. We learn, we adapt, and which depends on the socially transmitted information in school, in the media, in just conversation. So that's always changing. That's why cultures change over time, why our culture now is not the same as it was 400 years ago. Separately from that, has our cognitive neurobiological hardware changed. That is the brain circuitry that is that we're born with, that develops through life as the result of our genetic program. Now that is organized by the process of natural selection, the evolutionary biological process that made us human in the first place. That is almost impossible to predict because it's driven by what kind of genetic designs have the most surviving offspring, who has the most babies. And it has a speed limit measured in generations. It's next generation, the genes that are represented are slightly different than the previous generation because some people die, some people have more babies, and that accumulates over time. But our cultural environment changes so rapidly that it's very difficult to say what kind of genes are being selected now or to project that in the future. There are people who worry that since people with less education have more children, maybe the species will get kind of less intelligent over time. There'll be a selection against intelligence. There was a comedy movie called Idiocracy that was based on that fantasy.
And you don't subject to it?
We don't know, especially since demographics themselves can change so rapidly. We're seeing right now decline in the birth rates across most of the world, everywhere except pretty much Africa, and across multiple classes. I mean, there are some differences. Religious people have more children than secular people, but religious people have far fewer children than they used to.
Oh, really?
Yeah, everyone's having fewer people, fewer children. I mean,
yeah, of course. But
how will this change? Who will be the ones that have the more fewer children, surviving children? We just don't know.
The thing that I want to clarify is the cognition malleable due to the rapid changes of technology. Do we see? Of course, there's the genetic part, but in the same human as we grow. Perhaps. Can it change your cognition?
Well, I mean, yes, in the sense that if you can read, your cognition is different than if you can't read, if you can add, if you're literate with technology, if you know how to use, in the past, if you knew how to use Google, today, if you know how to use artificial intelligence, then what you devote your brain power to and what you offload to technology differs.
There's an argument there that it will cause a decline, just specifically artificial intelligence. The more you're dependent on it, less. Perhaps,
well, there may be. The thing is that as long as AI is not, omniscient, and it never will be, and as long as different AI systems might give different answers, and we know that they make errors, they hallucinate, they fail to generalize from their training sample, then there'll still be the need to evaluate their answers, in which case the ability to follow an argument, to evaluate evidence, will still be important in choosing to use AI and evaluating its results. It's similar to the debate that took place when I was in college when there were the first pocket calculators. Will that mean that people will lose their ability to do
Exactly.
calculations in their head?
Yeah.
To some extent, the answer is yes, but not completely. We still teach kids how to multiply, partly because they can't always pull out a calculator, partly because in order to do reality checks, sanity checks, to do have you entered the numbers right? Did you get a crazy answer? We need the mathematical intuition in order
Of
to
course.
use technology intelligently.
Just I think a better example perhaps is the usage of maps, which you used to have a
Yeah.
map just in order to get here. I would have needed a big map, but now I just put it in ways, and I didn't even, I checked out my brain. I didn't even remember the roads.
Yes.
So
Although it would be wise to use Waze or Google Maps in conjunction with spatial reasoning, so that you're not being sent down a non-existent road, or there
yeah, of
are
course.
in any case, whenever there is technology, there's still the need for enough knowledge to know when to choose that technology and whether to trust its answer.
I see.
In some cases, things might disappear entirely, but we may not miss them. So I'll give you another example from my college years. So I was taught how to calculate square roots with paper and pencil.
Yeah.
It is quite tedious. I wonder if there's anyone on the planet who knows how to do that today. Now you just have a calculator. You just press the square root button, and
Course,
that's
yeah.
it. But have we lost something? Probably not. It's probably better to do it. Let the calculator do it.
But didn't it made you a smarter person? Just the need to do it.
In that case, in the case of square roots, probably not. In the case of long division, maybe. I'll give you another example. When I taught I taught statistics at MIT for many years. And I taught students what I was taught. Namely, I gave everyone a formula twice. A formula, say, for a t-test or analysis of variance. There was the mathematical formula. Then there was called the computational formula. The computational formula was a transformation. So you could do it just by adding and subtracting and dividing. You didn't need to calculate all those square roots. And that's just simply because people didn't have calculators. There weren't cheap calculators. And so if there's a way of doing it without square roots, a shortcut, even though it was much more steps, but none of those steps involved a square root. We don't teach computational formulas like that anymore. It would be stupid. It would be a waste of time. So there's always a trade-off. You want enough intuition about the underlying knowledge, about the underlying logic, so that you can choose when to use the technology, how to evaluate the technology, but not so much that you're missing the whole point of the technology, which is to avoid calculations that a machine can do better and that you don't miss.
Of course, it sounds something like perhaps tell me if I'm wrong. One of your books, Enlightenment Now, was by Bill Gates. He said that it was one of the best books he ever read, or something like that, which I agree. It's a great book. But Bill Gates has a quote on this matter, which is, "I always prefer a lazy person to complete a task, because you will do it in the most efficient, in the less time than other people." So I think it's the same thing, right? You don't need most of your brain power to perhaps finish simple tasks or very complicated tasks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. But you still need enough judgment. You have to know, for example, in the case of AI, especially in the couple of years ago when the technology was really new, you had lawyers who used AI to formulate their briefs. And in a number of cases, it hallucinated cases that never existed.
Yeah.
Likewise, when I first started using it, and I asked my assistant to who you met, to trace down, get me some references, some articles from the library. And he said, "Well, the Harvard library system doesn't have these articles." And then I realized that they didn't exist. That I used the AI to find the literature, and it made a bunch of them up.
Yeah, he does it all the time. Yeah,
He does it all the time. So again, the obviously AI can multiply our own intelligence, but we still can't turn off our intelligence. We have to use it intelligently. And in the future, there'll be, I think everyone is going to have to learn the balance between evaluating what AI can and can't do and using it to do things that the human brain isn't good at doing.
Yeah, I come again from a part of the world which is very war-torn, and there's increasing use of AI in our military systems and stuff like that. So this is something that I'm very worried about, which is when it will have the power to choose the most efficient way possible to perform a task on the expense of casualties or stuff like that, because it's perhaps more rational for it. And as he said, it makes errors all the time.
Well, the thing is that would be an incredibly stupid thing to do, to give it the power without knowing what it's going to, what goals it's going to pursue. Reality is always going to be a constraint. And we also have to keep in mind, since we always are aware of the dangers of a new technology, but we take for granted the dangers of old technologies. And what we've seen, for example, in Gaza, in wars in general, not just Gaza, in all wars, there's massive numbers of civilian casualties because our current techniques, not using AI, just dropping bombs or artillery, are massively destructive. And we just take it for granted that's the way wars are fought. Now, of course, increasingly people aren't, and some of the criticism that Israel is now getting is for tactics that have always been used in warfare, but that somehow Israel is being accused of being uniquely evil for doing what all nations do in war.
Yeah.
But in the future, if to the extent that there have to be wars at all, and one could hope there'll be fewer and fewer of them, but if the damage was pinpointed at the offensive capabilities of the other side, there could be a big reduction in civilian deaths.
I didn't even consider this option. This is perhaps why you are an optimist in this field. Most people aren't. And other big figures in the field, in the industry of technology, are aiming towards the coalition of human-machine. Mm-hmm. What do you think of that aspiration? Is it something to aspire to as a human race?
What do you mean by?
I mean the symbiosis of human-machine.
Yeah. Well, that's been kind of all technology really is kind of a symbiosis of human machine. We wear clothing because clothing is better than our natural thermoregulation. Mm-hmm. We've in the last 25 years, we have smartphones that we pull out constantly to check because our memory is not as good. I have a hearing aid. Because my hearing has declined. So I think this is a natural development. It's kind of what technology really is a kind of a symbiosis of our creations with our own bodies.
Yeah, but how about the part of injecting stuff inside our brain or things that will...
Oh, you mean literally like brain implants?
Yeah.
I suspect we're not going to see that just because...
Really?
Yeah, just because it's so... compared to what evolution has already given us, direct interfaces with neural circuitry is going to be so much cruder than language and vision and motor control.
Well, we already see paralytic people.
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly. Well, that's my point. That's
okay.
For people with paralysis.
Yeah.
Because there you are... because the natural system has broken down. And so there, anything is better than just leaving the person paralyzed.
Oh, I see.
But for a person who's not paralyzed, then we already have extraordinarily complex and fine-tuned hundreds of thousands or millions of neural connections between the brain and the musculature, between the brain and the speech apparatus, between our eyes and our brain. For us to put in a silicon chip is going to, which doesn't grow, but is inserted. I never say never, but because our own brains have grown and they develop in 3 dimensions at a microscopic scale, optimized for for smooth motion, optimized for perception of the world, other than in cases where you're fixing, having the best possible fix for something that is broken. I doubt that we're going to have brain-computer interfaces in our lifetimes.
This is actually, it seems like perhaps it's the same thing that you said about superintelligence, but it seems like it's coming closer and closer just by the way they are speaking. But
yeah,
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
But I mean, the thing is that the way they're speaking is partly to attract investors,
of course,
to
it's
generate
marketing.
bubbles.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think there'll be. I'm very hopeful about technologies for people who are paralyzed. I think there's going to be fantastic progress.
Yeah, this is we already see.
Yeah, I mean, we're not seeing people with severed spinal cords walking
Of
yet.
course.
But much better than there was a few years ago, and I think I'm very very hopeful about that.
Yeah.
But I think for the idea that you will just think and control your iPhone by thoughts, my bet is we're not going to see that.
Really?
We don't need it.
Just like AI, I think that a lot of the progress comes from the art in this field, in sci-fi and stuff like that, in movies, in books. So this one is a thing that we see all the time, all across the board in sci-fi. The way, the next generation of phones will be just a screen on your eye or something. But I see your claim.
Well, there may be, there's something, you could have, like the Google Glass experiment. There could be glasses that have a little tiny display, but still taking advantage of your visual system.
Not replacing it, yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned the word that it's been used as a way to increase the bubble or stuff like that. Many statements are coming out just unresponsibly in this field. So how do we go about sorting which data is correct and which isn't?
Well, the main thing is to treat AI as a technology, as not as magic, not as a miracle. That is, it's just computational machinery doing stuff. There should be more awareness of how AI works. Excuse me. And that since it is a device, it's a gadget, it does some things well and some things not so well. It's got certain capabilities, but we shouldn't kind of fall back into magical thinking that somehow this is a genie, this is a supernatural force. It's a machine, and machines do things because they obey the laws of physics, and that we should treat it like a technology.
You think a lot of people see it as a miracle?
Yeah. Well, or they treat it as I don't think they literally believe that it's a miracle, especially in technology. But when it comes to things like superintelligence and some of the scenarios, it's giving it magical powers. Like the idea that with AI we'll cure cancer in a couple of years, not taking into account that our understanding of cancer depends on data from the world, which is going to depend on the speed at which tumors grow, and which depends on the database of how many humans there are who develop cancer. That you can't simply imagine a solution and consider that there is some system that just wills it into existence, that makes it happen. You've got to actually think through what is the process by which we gather knowledge, and what are the systems, what is the information that's going to be available to these systems. I think there's a lot of sci-fi and even religiously influenced speculation that just doesn't think about the constraints of the world, and that just imagines solutions that somehow magically come into existence.
That's amazing. And what about the workspace? The people are afraid of this going, taking jobs and stuff like that. What do you think about that?
Well, there'll definitely be some turnover in jobs. And we don't know what the impact will be. We do know that every prediction that new technology will eliminate jobs has turned out to be false. Really? Again, I grew up in the late 1950s and early 1960s. There was this term automation. That's what it was called then. There were jokes about it. There were songs about it. Alan Sherman, the Jewish comedian, had a song called Automation. But this was, and this is predicted throughout the 20th century. It's never happened. Our unemployment rate now is the same as what it was 100 years ago.
Yeah.
So because when human labor is available, then if there's one job that it no longer is needed to do, we find other jobs that didn't even exist. And part of it will be how to deploy AI in new ways to solve new problems.
Yeah, but I think the people who are benefiting the most of the spread of artificial intelligence is the people who are initially creating stuff, and the people who just want to take orders, I think, will have to find a way to adapt.
Yes, that's probably going to be true. And there may be some expansion. Well, if AI leads to big gains in productivity, that is, if it does things cheaper, faster, in the economic statistics, I don't think that total factor productivity, as economists measure it, has gone up yet as a result of AI.
Wow, this is fascinating.
I mean, it should soon. There may be a lag, just as there was what's called the productivity paradox in the 1990s with the introduction of personal computers, where there's massive adoption of personal computers, no change in the productivity statistics.
How do you measure it?
How do economists measure it?
Yeah.
In terms of inputs, how many hours of labor, how much capital investment, how many dollars spent in factories and machinery and computers and so on, and what is the GDP, how much economic activity comes out.
Oh, I see. Because personally, as an employer, in my case, I see it absolutely. One AI can do 10 people's jobs right now.
Well, it hasn't shown up yet in the economy. It may. Just to complete the story about the productivity paradox in the 1990s, there's a famous quote by a Nobel Prize-winning economist. I think it was, I don't know if it was Paul Samuelson at MIT, who said, "You see computers everywhere except the productivity statistics." Now, what happened was often when there's a new technology, it takes a while for companies to figure out how to optimize it, that often there are such big startup costs, paying for the equipment, getting people to readjust their schedules, their tasks, that when it came to computers, sometimes part of the paradox was it would take sometimes a whole afternoon to figure out how to hook up a printer to a computer. I remember those days.
Of course,
I lost a lot of time or getting the computer to print in italics. Damn it, why won't it print in italics? And then it's like 3 hours later, finally I got to print with italics, but there goes 3 hours.
Wow, yeah.
But it did happen. Their productivity did go up as the result of the personal computer.
Oh, so there's a lag.
There's a lag. Likewise, even electricity. It took a long time for factories, which had been driven by steam and by belts and gears and drive shafts, to reorganize themselves. That is, if you had a factory that was built with a waterfall and a mill and a bunch of leather belts, then simply giving it electricity, the factory was not optimized for electricity. So there'd be a lag sometimes of decades. Now, I suspect that will happen with AI. It hasn't happened yet, but it almost certainly will. As even things like driving and stocking shelves and manufacturing houses. But the thing is that if the society is so much richer as a result of this productivity, and it's natural when societies get richer, they have bigger welfare states. They give more money away. There's people retire earlier. There's more generous welfare payments, more unemployment insurance. There could be a transition that people who are working fewer hours, retiring earlier, staying in school longer, are being more compensated by government social payments, which because the society is so much more productive, it's not as big a deal as if we try to increase the welfare state now with our current level of productivity. So that's it.
It's amazing. I never even thought about it in this angle. So
Well, you might be right. I mean,
yeah, and
you
just
expect
how it feels, but it's
but when you think of a lot of the economy, building a house, how much of a house is built with AI or robots? Zero.
not yet. Yeah,
And a lot, so it does take a while. It's not the existence of the technology and the economic benefits are often out of sync. But I expect it will happen, as it has in the past. Will there be new jobs? We don't know in terms of there are
it
jobs.
seems likely.
Seems likely. I mean,
Yeah.
jobs that disappeared, like being a telephone switchboard operator, the lady who would put the wires in if every time you wanted to call, make a call, or elevator operators, a guy who would stand there all day with a lever, just going back and forth, stopping the elevator at a particular floor. So that pretty much doesn't exist. But there are jobs now, like website designer, that 25 years ago, no one would have known what that meant. Social media consultant.
This is a great example for things I think that might disappear soon.
Well, that they in turn might disappear.
Yeah.
But maybe how to use AI to have the best website or to optimize your social media engagement.
Of course, yeah.
That itself might be a job. But there may be other jobs that, because as we have more leisure, more luxury, more affluence, we didn't realize that there could be such a job, like a pet psychiatrist
Yeah.
or a video game costume designer.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I want to dive into a topic which, if I'm being honest, this is the thing that drawn me to your work early on, before many years, which is perhaps the concept of enlightenment and how it relates to the Western civilization and its ability to thrive in this era. What are the core values that the West civilization are standing on, and are they being threatened right now, in your opinion?
Well, I would distinguish between Western civilization and Enlightenment values. The Enlightenment did arise in the West, mostly, although from people who are also aware of other cultures, such as Eastern culture and Native American cultures. But resistance to the Enlightenment is also pretty Western. Communism, fascism, and romantic nationalism, romantic militarism. The West has had all these things. I mean, the West gave rise to Nazism. So I wouldn't equate Western civilization with Enlightenment
Completely
ideals.
understood, yeah. But the Enlightenment, let's start with their values. What are they?
Well, so there's no correct answer, simply because the Enlightenment thinkers often disagreed with each other and lots of things happened. It wasn't an official doctrine. It wasn't like, well, there's the religious scriptures and commandments, now we'll replace them with Enlightenment scriptures and commandments. So it's really more of a way of thinking. But the way I summarized it in the subtitle of my book was reason, science, humanism, and progress. So reason is just the realization that traditional forms of knowledge, like scripture, dogma, revelation, subjective certainty, charisma, all of these are roots to error, and that only applying reason can allow us to understand reality. So part of it is purging faith, scripture, dogma, charisma as sources of revelation, as sources of knowledge, and relying on reason. Second would be science, which is just, I think, the application of reason to understanding the natural world. Now, humanism is a value rather than a kind of knowledge or way of thinking. It's saying that the well-being of humans and perhaps all conscious creatures is the ultimate moral good, as opposed to, say, carrying out commandments or national glory. and that's the source of our doctrines of universal human rights. And then finally, progress, which is that if we apply reason and science to humanistic goals, that is, making people healthier, happier, longer lived, then we can succeed.
Yeah.
Gradually, with backtracking and errors, but overall, progress is possible.
Yeah, so those four elements, do you think that perhaps this is where I came from with the question, that the nations who are putting those values on the top of their flag, perhaps, are prospering more than others?
In general, yes. That is, I mean, it depends by which criterion. But if say the criterion is, say, the problem is how do you develop metrics for evaluating or comparing countries which don't themselves depend on Enlightenment values. But that is, to the extent that happiness is a value that we all share, safety, long life, and again, one could say, well, I'd rather blow myself up and die at the age of 25 and orphan my children, but at least I'll be in paradise.
Exactly.
Well, there, knowledge can push back against that value in the sense that as you realize, as it kind of sinks in, that there is no soul that goes to paradise because your consciousness exists in your brain. When your brain is blown up, your consciousness ceases to exist. Then you might think twice about paradise as a reward for blowing yourself up.
This is one way of taking this to the extreme, but it can be just, I will criticize my own people in this subject in this field exactly, because the other side is exactly blowing itself up and going to martyrdom. But in our place, we just aspire to things that don't put the personal values and science and progress on the top of our list. And then you want to expand, and you want to do many things that aren't very rational.
It's true that if the goal is that to carry out the aspirations of the Jewish people, or even a divine mandate that the Jewish people have a right to
it's becoming increasingly more popular, these views in my country.
Yes, so I mean that's a kind of counter-enlightenment view. That's the romantic nationalism of the 19th century, which was part of the counter-enlightenment that grew up partly in opposition to the Enlightenment. And in some ways, Zionism, of course, is a complex mixture of ideas, but one of the ideas behind Zionism was the romantic nationalism of the 19th century. The Italians united and had a state, the Germans united and had a state, and Greece got independence from the Ottoman Turks, and so the Jews should have a nation state as well. I mean, that's one of the sources, but of course Zionism also mixed in originally socialist idealism, at least going back to the early years. And of course, Israel did also commit to Enlightenment values of democracy, of liberalism, of women's equality, and of extending the franchise to all people, including the Arab citizens. So this was mixed in the beginning of Israel.
Of course,
But you're right that there are. I think maybe you and I would agree that it's unfortunate that the Enlightenment aspects of the project have been pushed back by some of the counter-Enlightenment forces.
Yeah, but I don't know if people are aware of how much those values are disastrous for any society, and how much the Enlightenment values are just a prerequisite for success as a country.
Well, I would say so. Just if you look at things, going back to answering your question, so if you look at what are the parts of the earth that seem to be, what countries are doing best, and again, one could argue, what does doing best mean? But let's say you live a long time, your citizens are happy, they're safe, they don't murder each other, they're educated, then it would be the countries of Western and Northern Europe and the former British Commonwealth, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Norway, Netherlands, Switzerland, all of which, to various extents, are based on Enlightenment principles. The United States is up there. It's not at the top. The United States, probably more than any country, was explicitly founded on Enlightenment principles. That is, the American framers were Enlightenment thinkers. They were influenced by other Enlightenment thinkers. The basis of government was nothing but a social contract to secure the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So that was a very Enlightenment ideal. You start with self-evident principles, equality of rights, and including life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And they called them self-evident, which meant they didn't really need the creator if they're self-evident. And from there, you deduce what should government do. But that was more explicit in the United States than in other countries. But any country that's based on liberal democracy is based on these ideas. Again, where policy is guided by science, where the religion of the country does not dictate its policy. And one could say that those societies are the most successful. They're also, maybe not coincidentally, the societies that people want to move to when they, as they say, vote with their feet. When people uproot from one country and move to another country, they tend to be people in Muslim countries moving to Sweden and France and Italy, not the other way around.
Exactly.
And so people are expressing a preference there.
Yeah. So it's not only a preference. I think it indicates the actual prosperity of the country.
Yes.
Yeah. So if the United States was founded on the Enlightenment values and then it succeeded to preserve it till this day, what do you think is first of all, what is the threat right now for it, and does it exist? So
yes. Yeah, you can't you can't force people not to have babies or vice versa. Although
you can
countries,
try.
you can try. Well, countries are now struggling with how to increase their birth rates.
Yeah.
With the below replacement rate fertility. It's a new problem, but one that societies will have to deal with. I think one has to have democratic safeguards so that no one faction can take over the country, to have guardrails and to have it as a priority that there are defenses against autocrats taking over.
But this happens many places, and most of them doesn't succeed, and it's mostly not for centuries.
No, but that has been, until the last couple of years, that has been the overwhelming trend. Has been, at least starting in the 20th century, there have been rises and falls in democracy, but the world is more, at least in the 21st century, the beginning of the 21st century was more democratic than ever in its history. So one can try to strengthen. Remember, you're asking two different questions: what should you do, and what has happened?
Of course,
what happens. What you should do is certainly safeguard the democratic guardrails and principles, so that it's harder for dictators and autocrats to take over. There obviously should be enhanced education, especially emphasizing reason, critical thinking, rationality. There should be, I think, more opportunities for people to experience each other's realities, more travel, more interchange, more knowledge about other people's lives, listening to other people, so that we can expand our sense of empathy and not as a pushback against our natural tendency to tribalism. So that is to continue the processes of the Enlightenment, to foster scientific understanding of as many things as possible.
First of all, the things that you're saying are amazing, and of course, I would wish that everybody would listen to it where I come from, because the trend is the opposite. So
no, I know. I've been to Israel a number of times.
Yeah.
And I have friends there. I have relatives there, and
so you know.
Yes, some of the trends are in Israel are definitely going. A lot of them are going in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll see what happens now with the new disaster with the Trump-Iran deal,
Yeah.
cutting Israel out, and whether that maybe some people will think twice about Netanyahu and Trump.
Yeah, we
But
have an election in 2 months.
you have an election,
so,
yes,
yeah, so,
right. But
I think he will win again, but this is never.
you think that Netanyahu will win again?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, I'll take this later.
So just last question. I could talk
Yeah.
with you all day, but you are a very, very busy man. We'll let you go back to your business. So just the thing that I was hoping to get out of this conversation, perhaps the most, is what do you think is next for science? I know it's a broad question, but perhaps what is the thing that you are working on going towards the future?
Let's see. So very hard to answer, because if we already knew what was most exciting, productive in science, that's what already would be, we would be doing it.
Yeah.
So it's always a hard question to answer about the future, at least to make it a surprising prediction.
Yeah.
But certainly, I mean, the most obvious answer is that artificial intelligence will speed up a lot of scientific discovery.
In your
Yes. So, for example,
yeah.
in understanding networks in the brain, we've part of our problem is that the brain has 100 trillion synapses, 87 billion neurons. How do we map that out? How do we understand what it's doing? So artificial intelligence will be important in two ways. One of them is just to help us understand real neural networks in real human brains. But another is, since it is going to be a second intelligent system, we can compare what the brain does with what current large language models do, to highlight the similarities and differences, the contrasts. To what extent is our intelligence being implemented in the same way as the systems that we have created? Now, ironically, some of that will involve doing neuroscience on the AI systems themselves, because they themselves are so complex. And since they're trained rather than engineered, we often don't know how they actually do their computations. But still, there'll be parallel analyses of human brains and AI systems and the AI systems will be a kind of benchmark or a kind of independent confirmation of what is necessary for intelligence to happen. That might also, in terms of human genetics, we have, again, there are 3 billion base pairs in the human genome. We have more and more data correlating genetic differences with differences in personality, intelligence. But what is the connection? Right now we just add up the effects of genes which are very, very tiny and try to make a prediction as to how your genome affects your behavior. But there may be many more complex relationships between our genome and our personality than just adding up the effects. So anyway, I think those are just two areas that I'm familiar with. In other areas of science, we know, for example, protein folding has been revolutionized by AlphaFold, one of the most difficult problems in science, which is, I don't want to say it's solved, but there's a massive amount of progress. So there's going to be those. My own research, I am going to continue to be curious about what large language models have to say about human language. Namely, we've seen quite sophisticated understanding and respect for grammatical complexity in AI output. It's grammatical. You ask it to make judgments about whether the sentence is acceptable or not. They capture human intuitions almost perfectly. Does that mean that there is no pre-wiring or innate preparation for language? Or does it mean that there are two ways that you can get to language? One is that you train a system for the equivalent of 30 million years with the entire World Wide Web. But since that doesn't seem to be the way that human babies learn to talk, they don't need that much training. Maybe human babies are pre-wired for language after all. And that's why we don't need 30 million years of training. We don't know the answer to those questions. What are the, and more generally, not just language, but in reasoning, common sense, modeling the world, in what ways are AI models as different from our way of thinking as, say, jet engines are from birds? You know, we know that jet airplanes and birds both obey the same laws of aerodynamics, but airplanes don't flap their wings, and birds don't burn jet fuel. Um, it's artificial. How artificial is artificial intelligence? Or what are the equivalent of the principles of aerodynamics? In the case of intelligence, principles of intelligence that apply to any system, whether it's real neurons or silicon. These are exciting questions. My own research has been concentrated on something we haven't talked about at all today, and that is common knowledge in the technical sense of I know something, you know it, I know that you know it, you know that I know it, I know that you know that I know that you know it. I've written a book, just came out a few months ago, called When Everyone Knows That Everyone Knows, Common Knowledge and the Mysteries of Money, Power, and Everyday Life. Just the short answer is that common knowledge is necessary for coordination, for two people to be on the same page, to each one knowing what the other one will do so they can meet up at a particular time, they can cooperate, they can coordinate. So it turns out to be a massively important concept in making sense of human economies, human political systems, our social relationships, our language, our nonverbal communication. That's what I argue in the book. I should add, by the way, for an Israeli audience, that some of the most important findings in common knowledge, some of the most brilliant people are Israeli, including the mathematician Robert Aumann, who is, I believe, just turned 95. I just came from a conference in Paris last week to celebrate the 50th anniversary of his famous theorem, and Professor Aumann himself flew to Paris to be at the conference.
Yeah, he's very. I had a chance to talk to him.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah, but he's very. Yeah, I'm surprised he traveled this far.
Well, the conference was in his honor. He was,
Yeah.
and there were other Israeli mathematicians, Dov Samet, and others. It's kind of an Israeli
Field,
specialty.
yeah, specialty.
Well, game theory in general and common knowledge in particular.
Just one thing. First of all, in common knowledge about the book, I will link to it in the description, so everybody who are interested can purchase it and look through it. And I especially recommend the talk you had with Neil deGrasse Tyson lately about it.
Oh yes, right.
Which was amazing. So I was really open to get to it and to cognitive biases, and also to the many things that perhaps we can do another time. So thank you so much for your time. It was amazing. Yeah,
my pleasure. Thank you for the very stimulating questions and the high level of conversation. I enjoyed it very much.
Thank you very, very much.